The numbers are starting to roll in, and even though it's still early in the year, one thing is already clear. The Samsung Galaxy S26 Ultra is shaping up to be one of the biggest smartphone success stories of 2026. In several major markets, early demand looks strong, and in places like the United States, reports suggest the S26 series is outpacing the Galaxy S25 lineup, while the S26 Ultra is absolutely dominating the rest of its own family. And here's the part that might surprise you. I'm not celebrating, not because I hate Samsung, not because I want the Ultra line to fail, and definitely not because the Galaxy S26 Ultra is a bad phone. It isn't. It's powerful, premium, and polished. But the S26 Ultra is also the perfect example of Samsung doing just enough and being rewarded for it. And as long as that keeps happening, Samsung has no reason to change, because Samsung will not change its ways unless you force it to. If the Galaxy S26 Ultra sells like crazy with specs and hardware decisions that feel conservative in 2026, what message does that send? It tells Samsung, loud and clear, keep spacing out the real upgrades, keep saving the big breakthroughs for later, we'll buy it anyway. So today, I want to talk about why the Galaxy S26 Ultra's success could actually be bad news for people who truly want innovation, and why waiting for the Galaxy S27 Ultra might be the only leverage consumers have left. Let's break it down. First, let's talk about what's happening right now. Multiple industry trackers have pointed to a stronger early performance for the Galaxy S26 family compared to the Galaxy S25 series, especially in the US. And within that lineup, the S26 Ultra is doing what the Ultra always does, taking the spotlight, taking the highest margins, and becoming the default dream phone for people upgrading. Samsung loves this. Investors love this. Retailers love this. But if you're someone who cares about meaningful upgrades, battery jumps, charging leaps, camera sensor advances, and real design evolution, this trend should worry you, because the Galaxy S26 Ultra is not Samsung's laziest flagship in the last decade. Not even close. But it's also not everything it should have been. Yes, Samsung added a privacy display angle to the conversation, and sure, it's a useful feature for people who work in public spaces, commute a lot, or just don't like shoulder surfers on trains and planes. But let's be honest, a privacy feature, a modest charging bump, and a familiar hardware package should not be enough to make a phone feel like a generational leap. And yet, if sales are booming, Samsung will treat it like confirmation that the formula is perfect. Here's where the frustration really kicks in. The Galaxy S26 Ultra feels like it should have been a transitional device, a bridge phone, a hold-tight flagship that keeps the Ultra brand strong, while Samsung prepares major next-gen upgrades, like the kind of things people have been begging for in a true iPhone 18 Pro Max competitor. Think about what many Android fans expected. Samsung to eventually deliver a battery closer to 6,000 mAh or more in a true endurance flagship. Wired charging that finally jumps to something like 100W, fast enough to change daily behavior. Not just marketing slides. A genuinely new 290p camera sensor. Not another year of squeezing marginal gains from older hardware, and maybe even bigger swings. A more radical redesign, slimmer bezels, next-level biometrics, and a wow factor. That feels unmistakably new. Now look at what we're actually getting in 2026. A 5,000 mAh battery. Again. 60W, wired charging. Which is an upgrade, yes, but still conservative in a world where competitors have been pushing far beyond that. And a camera situation that, depending on the exact configuration, still feels like Samsung is taking a careful, incremental approach instead of a fearless one. And that's the core issue. If the Galaxy S26 Ultra sells insanely well with a 5,000 mAh battery, 60W charging, and a camera strategy that doesn't scream brand new era, what incentive does Samsung have to deliver the big upgrades next year? Why would they rush? Why would they take risks? Why would they spend more to give you more if you're already buying the current model in huge numbers? That's why I'm saying something that sounds crazy in a year where the S26 Ultra is winning. I hope more people hold off and wait for the Galaxy S27 Ultra. Not because the S26 Ultra is trash. But because Samsung responds to pressure, not praise. And if you want Samsung to stop drip-feeding innovation, the only language that works is demand, or more specifically, withheld demand. Now let's talk about what the Galaxy S27 Ultra could realistically look like if this S26 Ultra momentum continues. I'll start with charging because this is where Samsung tends to move slowly. Do I think Samsung will jump beyond 60W next year? Honestly, I struggle to believe it. Samsung doesn't typically upgrade the same headline spec in big ways 2 years in a row, and 60W is already being treated like a new era in Samsung marketing terms. So if you're expecting 80W or 100W on the Galaxy S27 Ultra, ask yourself, what would force Samsung to do that? Because if the S26 Ultra sells like a monster with 60W, Samsung can simply say, people are happy, we listened, we improved it, done. And that's exactly how innovation gets delayed. Next, battery. This is the big one, and also the most frustrating one. In 2026, a 5,000 mAh battery on an Ultra phone feels safe, familiar, predictable. And yes, Samsung has to balance weight, thickness, thermals, and internal layout. I get it. But here's the problem. Competitors are finding ways to push capacity higher using newer battery chemistry, including silicon-carbon approaches that allow more energy density without turning phones into bricks. If Samsung truly wanted to win the battery conversation, the Galaxy S27 Ultra could aim for something like 5,500 mAh to 6,000 mAh, especially as displays get brighter, chips get more powerful, and AI features keep running in the background. But what's the realistic expectation? If Samsung plays it cautious, we might see something like 5,500 mAh or 5,300 mAh, just enough for a spec bump headline, not enough to feel revolutionary. And if the Galaxy S26 Ultra is already selling incredibly well, Samsung can easily justify a small jump like that instead of a dramatic one. Now, cameras. The Ultra camera story is complicated, because Samsung does often deliver excellent results, and software processing can be just as important as hardware. But the complaint from longtime Samsung watchers is simple. The Ultra line sometimes feels like it's recycling core components for too long. So the big question for the Galaxy S27 Ultra becomes, will Samsung finally introduce a truly new main camera sensor and meaningfully upgraded optics? Or will it tweak processing, adjust tuning, and call it next gen? And here's the nightmare scenario. Samsung redesigns the camera layout again, new rings, new alignment, new look, without delivering a major, instantly noticeable jump in actual photo and video performance. Cosmetic change without real substance. If that happens, a lot of people are going to feel like they've been sold the same story again. Now let's bring Apple into this, because Samsung's biggest reason to innovate is competition. If Apple drops an iPhone 18 Pro Max with huge, undeniable upgrades, battery, cameras, video, charging, new hardware features, Samsung is forced to respond. But are we confident that's happening? Not really. Apple tends to move strategically, especially around milestone years, and while Apple can absolutely deliver major improvements, it's not guaranteed that the iPhone 18 Pro Max will suddenly become the kind of leap that forces Samsung to go all in next year, which means Samsung might feel even more comfortable staying conservative with the Galaxy S27 Ultra.